My family betrayed me in court for my son's custody. Now they beg for help after my ex turned on them. I secretly recorded their confession. Hello. So this is going to be a little long because I need to include a lot of context for it to make sense. Mallory, 33 years old, got divorced a few months ago, but it had been planned for over a year. I met my ex-husband, Frank, through friends when I was 25, and after 2 years of dating, we decided to live together, and his family was quite conservative and traditional, and they did not approve of leave-ing in relationships, so we had to marry if we wanted to be together. I genuinely liked Frank, so I didn't mind marrying him. My parents supported our decision, so we married within a year of leave-ing together. I discovered that I was pregnant, and we were ecstatic. It seemed like our family was finally coming together. Everything was falling into place. Unfortunately, after I revealed my pregnancy, my in-laws began pressing me to quit my career and focus on being a mother. It didn't help that my job was not very generous about maternity leave, and because I hadn't been there long, my leave would be especially brief, so at the time, I considered the advantages and cons and decided to leave my work. I didn't make this decision alone. Frank and his parents were convincing me it would be the greatest decision in the long, so I just had to do it. Frank appeared assured and promised to take care of the family. I didn't have to worry about money. He'd bring enough home, and my sole attention would be on raising our child. My parents and older brother both agreed it was best if I stopped my job and stayed at home. Like my mother had done, she elected not to return to work because family was her top concern. With pressure from both sides of the family, I chose to quit during my second trimester. Everything appeared to be in order, and I had complete faith in my husband to not let me down. So I quit my booming career to become a stay-at-home parent. However, shortly after my kid was born, I observed something peculiar about Frank's behavior. Throughout the latter months of my pregnancy, I couldn't put my finger on it, but the vibe felt odd. Sure, he seemed joyful when our baby was born, and I expected things to return to normal, but unfortunately, they worsened. He got angry around me, and if I tried to speak with him, he snapped. He only seemed genuinely happy when he was playing with our son. Aside from that, it seemed like he was constantly annoyed to be at home with me. He started working longer hours, and even on weekends, he made excuses not to spend time with me. I didn't understand what was wrong, but I kept trying to make our marriage work. Unlike him, I still loved him and refused to give up on us. This pattern persisted for around 2 years following my son's birth. Frank stayed at work longer than required, and even when he came home, he wasn't truly with me. I couldn't really complain since whenever I tried to talk to him, he said he was too exhausted from work, and it was not an easy chore for him to be the sole breadwinner for the household, which was really disrespectful to me because I was perfectly capable of earning money for myself, but I had to rely on him since he promised to make things easy. I even asked him a few times if he would rather that I return to work so that we could split the bills and he didn't have to face all of the pressure. However, he claimed that would be an insult to him and his abilities and that his parents would never accept. We have a difficult time with him if I went back to work, so I stayed at home and raised my son, which was the only thing that made me happy because Frank had changed. He was no longer the man I'd married. About a year ago, I discovered that Frank had an affair with one of his coworkers. It was quite difficult for me to find this because I had been skeptical for quite some time. I even snooped through his phone and laptop while he was sleeping and discovered nothing. I knew all of his passwords because he had written them down in his notepad, but that didn't help. It almost seemed as if he had nothing to conceal, and I began to feel dumb for being cautious. I even searched through his possessions for a burner phone or anything odd, but I found nothing. I began to suspect that I was being overly paranoid and insecure, but as luck would have it, I witnessed his cheating firsthand. About a year ago, Frank and I were organizing a spectacular birthday celebration for our son. He'd invite Ted, the co-worker he was fooling with. She was a single mother with a youngster around our age, so I wasn't surprised she got invite Ted. Frank had informed me she was a very close friend, so I saw nothing wrong with her being there. After my son had cut his birthday cake, I went upstairs to change into more comfortable attire for the celebration. When I got into my bedroom, I saw Frank and his co-worker making it. She was seated on his lap. It took me a few minutes to grasp what I saw. First and foremost, it was in my bedroom, which exacerbated the situation. Second, they did not even pause when they heard the door open. I had to walk up to them before they noticed I was there. I'm quite sure they felt it was great to make out in my bedroom at home, just for the thrill of it. But they obviously did not anticipate me to have a complete breakdown. I'm not proud of it, but discovering that what I believed for so long was true sparked something inside me. I grabbed the coworker's hair and began dragging her out of the room. According to what I was later told, Frank is physically stronger than me, but he was unable to stop me. I can't recall much of it since I had a rage blackout. I carried her downstairs, Frank following behind me, and tossed her in the center of the room when everyone was still present. I don't recall much of what I said, but I supposedly called her various disparaging names and informed everyone what she and Frank were up to in my bedroom. I didn't care if my kid or his pals were present. Looking back, that was really uncomfortable and inappropriate, but I didn't consider it at the time. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My parents, brother, and in-laws were all present. My father eventually calmed me down and returned me to my room. Once inside, I completely broke down and sobbed uncontrollably, but rather than staying with me to console me, my father locked me in my room and returned downstairs. I should have known then that my parents did not genuinely care about me. I knew they were more concerned with appearances than reality, but this was absurd. Nobody came to check on me over the following several hours. Even after I calmed down, I had no idea what was happening outside. I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't reach anyone. It wasn't until after midnight that my brother unlocked the door and allowed me out. He didn't even inquire how I was. They probably would have kept me in the room longer if I hadn't started banging on the door like a crazy lady. When I got out, I asked my brother what had transpired since I was locked. He informed me that practically everyone had fled following my collapse. He also told me Frank had departed with his parents and our children. My parents, brother, and I were the only people left in the house. My brother let me out to discuss what we should do next, but in my family, discussion means telling me what to do. They informed me that I needed to apologize to everyone for how I had behaved at the party. Not only that, but I also needed to apologize to Frank's parents. Apparently, Frank had difficulty convincing his co-worker not to file charges against me, because what I did to her was technically an act of physical assault. My family told me that I owed it to Frank to speak things out and work on our marriage rather than making this a bigger deal. I lost it. I screamed at them to leave my house because I was not about to allow anyone stand under my roof and order me to apologize to my unfaithful spouse. I got into a heated argument with my family because they told me that I owed it to Frank to make things right and give the marriage another try, or they would sever ties with me. So I told them to go ahead since I'd gotten to the point where I didn't care what anyone thought of me. I was going to file for divorce and get out of this situation without anyone's approval. I found a lawyer the next day and filed for divorce. Less than a week after the occurrence, Frank was served shortly after, and he had the arrogance to express disappointment and disbelief. He returned home the same day. He was served with the divorce papers and demanded an explanation. I told him I was not going to take him back after what he had done and how he had disrespected me. We had a nasty verbal argument in which I called him a lot of names, and he promised me that I would never see my son again. I had no idea he would actually keep his word. Then the legal struggle started. We had very few common assets, so the divorce proceedings were far smoother than the custody battle. The house belonged to me because I bought it with my own money, and there was no doubt about that. Everything else was to be auctioned, with the earnings dead between us. We only had to wait the 6-month waiting time mandated by the state, after which the divorce would be finalized if a settlement was. The only disagreement was about alimony, because Frank forced me to quit my work, and I didn't have enough money. I needed alimony to start anew. He, however, believed that I should not receive any alimony at all. Fortunately, I had a few texts that demonstrated he had promised to support me. Otherwise, I might not have received. The divorce process was easier for me emotionally because I had already distanced mentally from Frank. However, it was the custody struggle that truly killed me. Unfortunately, my parents and brother stabbed me in the back for cash. My ex-husband and his lawyer were nasty, and they started building a case against me, painting me as an unstable, reckless, and insane mother. They wanted to show that I was unfit to raise our son alone, so Frank and his parents should gain full custody. I assumed my parents and brother had been bought off by my ex-in-laws because they were wealthy, and I couldn't think of another reason for my own family to turn against me. I'm very sure my family warmed up to my in-law from the start because of their money. Frank accused me of being a functioning alcoholic with serious rage issues. They made up situations in which I allegedly lost my temper and endangered my son, even though none of this had actually occurred. They needed to portray me as the VY lane. I expected some people to side with me, but all of my friends supported Frank, which I believe was owing to my breakdown at my son's birthday party. The worst betrayal, however, occurred when my parents and brother testified against me in court, stating I needed rehab and intense therapy before being permitted to see my son. They even suggested that Frank cheated because he was tired of coping with my unpredictable behavior, or, despite a good fight with my counsel, I was unable to win custody of my son. The odds were stacked against me, and there was little I could do to prevent the INEVY table. My lawyer and I worked hard to gather proof to prove I was a decent mother, but it all went to waste. The decision was revealed a few months ago, and it was the last time I saw my kid in person. I was granted Super VY, said VY, citing PRI-VY leges, but Frank never let me see him. It was pointless. My son is now 4 years old, and I'm constantly concerned that he'll forget me. According to a few relatives that remain on my side, my family continues to see my son. They routinely publish images with him, but I can't see him. Frank and my son live with my in-laws, and it appears that everyone but me gets to spend time with him. I cannot imagine something more heartbreaking. I've been VYing on memories of my son, thinking Frank was taking excellent care of him. I don't think I could have VY-dead a comfortable life for him on my current pay, given I've only lately resumed work. I got a job at a friend's startup, but it doesn't pay well. Most of the employees are in their early 20s, working for experience and expecting to advance to better chances. Although I receive alimony, it is insufficient to maintain my pre-VYS lifestyle. I can't cut expenditures like a bachelor, but it's all I have right now. I had wanted to reapply for joint custody once my life was in order, but an unexpected chance presented itself. A few weeks ago, my parents contacted me after months of silence to ask for assistance. It turned out that Frank was not the fantastic man they thought he was. My brother sent me an email requesting that I come over to their place since they had realized something crucial and wanted to come clean. They were tired of keeping secrets from me and wanted to be a part of my life again. I tried to ignore the email, but I couldn't quit thinking about how this might help me get my son back, so I went to their place that evening. I anticipated them to be VYing like kings after selling me out for money from my ex-in-laws. However, they were actually VYing in worse conditions than pre-VY usly. My son, on the other hand, was overjoyed to see me, which added to an already wonderful evening. When I VY-sided my family that day, they practically began pleading for forgiveness as soon as I walked in the door. Apparently, they recognized how severely they had messed up, and there was no turning back, yet they still wanted me to forgive them. After the divorce, when my ex-in-laws and Frank were approached about the money they had been promised, Frank informed my family that it was no longer occurring. Apparently, they had just been told that they would be well compensated if they turned on me and testified in their favor. However, there was no written EVY denke to support it. If my relatives tried to go back and inform me about everything, Frank and his family would make sure they never saw my son again. So for the protection of my son, they agreed to keep their mouths hidden even though they had not been paid as promised. But things grew worse. They were not only pushed into testifying again, but they were also treated as free babysitters. Every day, Frank would drop off our boy at my parents' house, and they had to watch him while VYing up their own time. It was really inconvenient because both my father and brother had jobs to attend to, and my mother couldn't handle all of the housework and caring for her grandchild on her own because she was getting older, so either my father or brother would have to work from home every day, which was growing increasingly tough for them, which is why they approached me to finally put an end to it. Apparently, they wanted to make a deal with me. They told me that if I VY-dead them the money my ex-in-laws promised, they would represent me in court and ensure that I got custody of my son. I was going to recommend it myself, but it wasn't unexpected that they did. My family had always been materialistic, and this was especially true now that my father's business had failed and they were back to working for other people. Obviously, they would want money more than ever now because my father wanted to retire but didn't have enough saved because he had invested all of his money in the firm, which eventually failed. They claimed they could make up a tale about how they were forced and coerced into testifying again, so they wouldn't be charged with perjury while under oath. They were unaware that I no longer required their assistance. I had been recording everything they said since the moment I came inside the house, since I suspected something was wrong and didn't want to take any chances, so I had already recorded everything. Nonetheless, I encouraged my family to give me screenshots if they had any to prove they had been used and lied to, and I promised to help them. Following that, I departed. I'd already seen my son, and and I had more than enough EVY denke to seek custody again. So that's what I did the next day with my lawyer. This time I was ready. The custody lawsuit is still ongoing, but one thing is certain. I will be able to prove that none of the accusations Frank made against me were accurate and that my family had been lying about everything all along. I've already listened to the recording, which has greatly influenced my decision. Frank and his lawyer are literally rushing for EVY denke while I take it all in and enjoy the show. This is what they made me go through the last time, and now I get to do it to them. It's karma at its best, and I couldn't be happier. The only thing that hasn't been ideal is that my family has said I used them just like Frank did, and that I had no right to record them without their permission and use it against them. However, in my state, that is perfectly legal and acceptable. I had no idea what they were talking about until they told me I had broken their trust by recording them. Bold statements from those who broke my confidence by siding with my ex-husband in the custody dispute. They believed that what I did was wrong because what they had done was out of necessity. They needed the money, but I didn't need to screw them over and expose them to perjury. They stated they had already committed to assist me and testify against Frank and his family, so I didn't need to go behind their back. They keep contacting me, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to ignore. So, am I a jerk for going over my family's back and putting them in danger of being charged with perjury?